name's Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IVOrganics, where we grow cool plants. And today, this lesson is all about pruning your roses. As you can see behind me, my Double Delight roses are way overgrown. And I visited a lot of residents in the last month, and a lot of them are of concern about pruning their plants, even in general. The issue being, does cutting my plants hurt them? And I think of all plant lessons to be learned here. And there are some plants such as citrus that require very little to no pruning. Compared to roses, the more you cut them, the better. So we're gonna do a lesson, but before we start, check out these plants and just do a review and take a look at how tall they've grown over the course of this last year. And I prune these down a lot every single year, and you're gonna see what they're gonna look like by the end of this video. But you can see that these plants have grown about 6 feet tall. That's my height. You can see that they've got some blooms on here, which I know for some of you is going to make it especially hard to cut it, knowing that there's some flowers coming. But this is a must-do for the health of the plant. And let's go and check out a video that we posted about 6 months ago so you can see how beautiful these Double Delight roses look. Check this out. So you can actually see that the plant is actually going beautifully into bloom in many places. Here it's actually developing, and then once they're done, you can actually see that they're actually turning more pink. So it starts off more as a white light rose and develops more into a reddish dark pink. So it actually transitions into those two different colors. It's called Double Delight, and I would say the reason behind it is the beauty that the plant offers, as well as the double being the fragrance is phenomenal. The only other rose that I'd say comes comparably close would be the Mr. Lincoln, but the Mr. Lincoln is completely distinguishable as a different smelling type of rose. This is a true beauty, and definitely one worth considering adding to your garden. So my rose bed right now is in the shade, and here we are the first week of March, but within the next couple of weeks, between mid to late March, this entire rose bed will be in the sun from March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. So it's gonna create all of these sugars, blossoms, perform, do wonderfully well. And then in the winter months, when the plant is least active and when it's going to be back in the shade, it's going to have all of those sugars back in its root and in its stems, and basically hold on tight until we get back into the warmer weathers as we are now this first week of March. And hence the reason that we're doing this pruning project. So let's get on with it. So there's a variety of diseases that affect roses, and of the diseases, I've got 2 examples to share with you behind, but some of the diseases include black spot, rust, which is a type of fungal disease, aphids, brown canker, blight, powdery mildew, just to name a few. Check out a couple of these that I've got here behind me. If you take a look, for example, over here in this zone, you'll notice that there is this white powdery mildew that's all over the surface of the plant. This here can be treated quite simply with a spray of just neem oil and water, probably about a teaspoon per gallon or a tablespoon per gallon, somewhere in that range, should get rid of this within about 24-hour period. Another issue that I found underneath this leaf over here, if you take a look at this one, you can take a look underneath here and you'll see these orange spots which are identified as rust, and this here is a fungal disease as well. So I was able to point out 2 diseases that are going on here in the garden. Another point I want to make out is the time right now is 1 o'clock, believe it or not, and my roses are in the shade. I'm facing north, facing you. Behind me is south, and so the house is casting a shadow on these plants pretty much from November, December, January, February. Here we are on March 7th, and I want to share with you the time here. If you come in a little closer, you can see that it's 1:15 in the afternoon on this Tuesday, March 7th. Again, here we go. Tuesday, March 7th. And if we tap the screen, I want to share with you the weather. So we've gone from a lot of 50s and 60s, and check out this week now. Today's highs, it's right now 72. Tomorrow's 84, 85, 84, 80, 81, 81. So a lot of hot days coming. We're definitely out of our rainiest winter, I would say in almost the last 10 years here in Los Angeles. But take a look at the nighttime low temperatures, and this is really what's waking up your plants. The nighttime temperatures are approaching the upper 50s and getting closer to the 60s, and it's that's actually waking up your plants. We're no longer in the 40s. you know, in lower 50s. We're now approaching the upper 50s and getting close to 60. And it's your nighttime low temperatures that are waking up your plants and saying, hey, it's time to grow and it's time to flower. So what we're going to do now is prune the plants, and I want to share a few tips with you in regards to what to do. The first thing, and you'll notice that I've got my long sleeves on. We're now going to put on some gloves, and I've got with me these two tools. One being I've got my saw, and the second one being I've got very sharp pruners. You want to make sure that you're using a good tool to accomplish this, and let's get started. So if you take a look down below here, you'll notice that of this particular rose bush, and I believe there's one or two, actually even three plants here, so they're planted pretty close to one another. You'll notice that there's a lot of dead wood in here. The ideal time for pruning your plants is, again, after your chance of frost has passed, which, depending on where you live in the country, could be anywhere from January through about April. So for us, I've missed my opportunity to prune these back in February. Here we are again on the first week of March, but I'm doing this as soon as I can, and hopefully going to get to enjoy the new growth and new blooms as early as possible in the season. Let's get around and start pruning these branches. So the first step when pruning your roses is to get as close as you can to the living tissue, which is over here, which is this branch. And this branch, as you can see, is completely brown and dried out. So we're going to go with our pruners, and again, as close as we can to the branch, or we can say the trunk of the rose. We're going to just cut it like so, and pull that out. And here's another below here. We can see that this branch has died back all the way down this entire tree trunk, and it's left behind these two sucker branches. So we're going to leave these sucker branches to create next year's growth, and we're going to take out this branch all the way down to where that sucker is. And I'm hoping you can zoom in and come a little closer, but the sucker branch is right here, right there. So we're going to go with our pruners again and prune it right there. And as I did so, I just noticed, and you maybe caught this as well, but you can see, let me get that out of the way, you can see that there's new life right there, right where my finger is. You can see there's some new growth happening right there. So we're going to continue this process of removing the dead wood. There's a third branch over here as well, and we'll just go again as close as we can to the living tissue, which is right below here, and we're just going to remove that as well. And pull that out of the way. So you can see that we removed a significant percentage of wood, but so far all we've taken out is what's dead. Here we are behind another rose bush, and another point to be made is if you can take a look at this stalk, and you can see that sometimes the older stalks will die. This one is all brown all the way down to this point over here. And again, here we are in Los Angeles, where the temperatures are, you know, pretty mild in the winters. We're not dealing with the freezing cold temperatures that would typically cause this kind of dieback, but you can see that sometimes even based on age. And additionally, these plants were planted in the late 70s and early 80s, so they've been here for at least 30, if not close to 40 years now. So, you know, these plants have been here for a long time, and the goal is now with this larger stalk is take your saw, and we're gonna go as low as we can, and you can see that this main stalk has created all these additional sucker branches that are behind it. So we're gonna have to thin that out next. But first, let's cut this branch out of the way. We're gonna get that out of the way. Oh. So you can see as I was trying to prune the branch, and due to my angle, I kind of scarred a little bit upon this branch over here, but we're gonna have a remedy for that at the end. And this was accidental, but we're gonna do something to patch that in just a moment. And now the next goal is to basically separate the branches. There's just way too many branches. Overall, and this is not the best example, the better example would be this rose bush that's in front of me, which is more of the model rose bush that you'll find in most gardens. But while I've got you here on this branch, the principle I'm gonna be applying is to, again, first remove the dead wood, and secondly, the goal is to now control the height, and you can prune your branches down to anywhere from about 6 to 12 inches, and the goal with bringing them down that small is you're going to result with a lot of larger blooming roses. You can also prune it to about as tall as 18 inches and have more stalks, and by having more branches you'll have more roses, but they'll just be smaller and you're going to have a lot less vigor. But if your goal is to have a vigorously strong plant, prune them down to about 6 to 12 inches, which is what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to limit the number of canes, which is the number of branches, to anywhere from about 3 to 5 per plant. So here we go. With this one here, I'm just going to take it down like so. Moving this cane and throwing that over there. And it looks like I'm obviously going to be left with 2 canes now. And what I'm looking for next is I'm looking at the bud. And you can take a look if you come in a little closer. What I'm going to do is wherever that bud union is, I'm going to cut at an angle like so. And I'm cutting it at an angle, at a 45-degree angle, leaving more wood on the side of the bud and less wood behind it. And the reason I selected this bud is because it's growing away from the wall. Typically you're selecting a bud that grows away from the center, but if the center is here, it's going to grow right towards it. Again, this isn't the best example, but it's the only choice I had with this one. And I'm again now going to remove the stalk that's behind it as well. So that's out. And now with this remaining branch, we're going to do the same thing. I see the bud union right there. And I don't know if you can see that red eye right there, but this here is going to form the next bud for the next branch and supporting flowers in the future. So we're going to cut it like so, again at an angle, 45 degrees, with a little bit more room on the side of the bud and a little less room on the back side. And that branch will go out as well. So let's go back to this example now. So here we are behind another rose bush. This one has, let's count how many canes this has. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 canes. My goal with this one is to bring it down to about 5. So we're gonna thin out 50% of it. Anything that's crossing towards the center is gonna come out first. So what I'm gonna do here is remove this stalk over here. And you can see that I still have this crown over here, which is where all the branches typically come out of. Here's another crown that died back many years ago. Over here is a larger crown, and this one here is a smaller crown. But I'm actually going to just cut it right to the crown, like so. And this branch will come out. And then we'll continue the process. This here is some dead wood. We'll cut out the dead wood. And then you can see when it comes to the branches, we can see that this one here is growing towards the center, but this one here on the outside is growing away. So we're going to prune right above the bud that is growing away from the center. And that's going to determine where our cut's going to go. And now we'll continue the process. I still want to select a few more branches out. So here we have 2 canes, 1, 2. They're both growing parallel to one another, which is not an ideal situation. So the goal is to select one of these 2. The one that's more accessible is the one on top. And therefore, I'm going to remove the top one and leave the bottom one to continue. So we're just going to prune that out like so. In fact, because it's too close to this wall, I'm going to remove both of them. So I'm pruning both of these out. So I'm just going to go straight down on both of those canes and remove them like so. And here goes one. And here goes the second. And we'll continue the process here. We're gonna remove this cane. This one over here is crossing. So actually these two will come out as well. We're gonna go as low as we can on the stalk. And we can see off of this branch over here, right here, there's this branch that's coming off the back, which is a young cane from just last year. So we're gonna allow this to stay. And this wood from about 2 years ago will come out. So we'll prune it like so. There we go. So we cut it about 1/4 of an inch above the last branch, and that'll come out. And there's one more to go, which is this one here. You can clearly see this one here is growing right through the center and occupying the center space. So this one here will come out as well. We'll use our saw this time and prune like so. There that goes. And now we just got to bring the rest of these branches down to about 6 to 12 inches. So we're going to come up about this spot over here, and now I'm looking at the buds to determine which ones are pointed away from the center of this vase that we've created. And that would be this bud over here. If you take a look right there, we'll do this together. So you can see there's the bud. I'm just going to come in about 1/4 inch above and at an angle, and there that goes. And we'll do one more over here. So here we are. Now in regards to the last stalk, and surprisingly we went from 10 and now we only have 3. If you take a look now, before we prune this branch out, we can see that the bud is over here, but this is pointed in towards the center. So we're gonna go up to the next node, which is right up here. And you can see that's where all the branches are coming, and there's a couple of buds that are pointed away from the center. So this is where we're gonna do our pruning. So this one will be our first cut right there. And we'll get that branch out of the way. And we'll do the second cut like so. And you may even get a bud on either side, as we do in this case. We've got a bud here and a bud there. On this side, I don't know if you can see that red dot. Right there. So we've got a bud on this side and then a bud on this side. So these will both form branches going out in this direction. And we've completed our pruning lesson on this particular rose that had 10 stalks and brought it down to 3, and we've pruned it down to be right at about 1 foot tall. And keep in mind that this plant, as you saw just moments ago, will grow to 8 feet over the course of this one growing season. So I'm going to continue this pattern now with the rest of the roses. There's one more to my right that I want to share with you as well. And this one here was created by a cutting. And this was a cutting off of one of the roses that we did. So this rose here was another one of the Double Delight roses that was created by cutting off of one of those parent plants behind me. As you can see, this one here left us with a flower that just recently bloomed. And again, this is, as I've said in prior videos, one of the most fragrant of the rose varieties. The only one I would say that is comparable but also very different in scent is the Mr. Lincoln red rose. But what we're going to do with this one, so this one's about 1 year old now. And again, we're going to follow the same principle, being we're going to prune it down to about 1 foot off the ground. And as you can see, if you come in a little closer, you can see that there's a bud over here. And there's another bud over there. And there's another bud also behind it, which you don't have to come around to see. But the point is, by pruning it like so, we're gonna follow the bud and we're gonna prune at 45 degrees with more wood on the bud side and less wood behind it. So we've just accomplished that prune. But what's gonna happen now is each of these buds are gonna swell up and create 3 more branches at this point. All of these buds will branch out and create a nice, beautiful rose bush that we'll get to enjoy over the next, over the rest of this growing season. You may notice as well that this trunk has been coated with white, and this was again done about a year ago, and we coated it with a product called IVOrganic. The concept of painting your plants goes back hundreds if not thousands of years, but IVOrganics is an organic way of coating your plants, and here it says 3-in-1 plant guard protection against damaging sunburn and insects and rodents for use on your roses, fruits, and nut trees, ornamental trees, and shrubs. It's a non-toxic, environmentally safe, and organic product, and it's registered material for use in organic agriculture. And you can see here, and this is when we used it, protects newly installed plants and trees, shields pruned and damaged surfaces. So we're going to be coating all of our damaged surfaces momentarily, but in the sense of protecting newly installed plants and trees, what the product does is it helps keep the plant cooler, and it helps it retain moisture, and it also, we planted this mid-spring, so the weather was a little bit too warm when we brought it in, and by keeping it cooler, it has a better chance at growing successfully. And as you can see here, aside from the color white, it's also available in colors brown and green, and it's also available as a spray ready to go if you want to use it as a foliar spray for trunk, branches, and leaves protection against, again, damaging sunburn insects. And you can just shake it and spray it, which we're going to do at the end of this video. Let me continue with the pruning of the roses behind me, and then we'll continue with the next steps. Follow me. So we started off this video talking about rose diseases, and all of the leaves that you see down here, it's also called the leaf mold. Typically, if it were other plants in your garden, you would leave it, as the nutrition in the leaves and all the, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and all the elements that go into making the plants would then return back into the soil. But when it comes to roses, and because of the number of diseases that roses have, you need to remove all of the last year leaves. So we're going to come in here and basically pull out of here all of the leaves from last year, and we're not returning any of those leaves into the compost pile. All of this will go into the waste receptacle, again, because a lot of these leaves contain diseases that can spread from year to year. So you want to get this away from your roses and away from your property. So we're going to clean this all out. If you can keep some of these wood chips behind, we're going to leave them behind, but we're going to improve the soil next. So next step is just removing all of last year's leaves. So here we go. Check out how many branches we just took out of the roses behind me. Look at all this. And now take a look at what the remaining plants look like. Check these all out. You'll see that I brought all of them down to about a foot off the ground. All of them have been limited to about 2 to 5 canes per plant. And one thing, as I was back here, I noticed that this old rotted crown that hasn't been producing branches for many years, you can see is, I'll wiggle it out, I want to pull this out with you here. You can see that the root has created this branch, but this here is all full of beetles and termites, as you can see by these holes and these tunnels in here. Maybe I can come with my scissors. But we're going to be using our product now to seal these possible entryways, which, as they go down the center of these canes into the heart of the wood, and we'll discuss that momentarily. But anyways, for those of you that don't believe me, I do this every single year for the last 5 years for these particular roses, and let's go look at that video for just a couple more seconds so you can see how beautiful they're going to look this spring, summer, and fall. Check this out. Every time we actually come home, we can actually smell them, and especially if the wind's blowing in the right direction, it's a beautiful rose to actually add in the front door, as well as in your backyard where you actually spend the most time. We just removed all of these leaves from last year that fell as leaf litter underneath the plants, and our next step now is to fertilize the plants. And what I've got is a couple of products. A lot of you may have heard of Miracle-Gro. And Miracle-Gro, I'm not going to say is a bad company, as Miracle-Gro has both an organic and a chemical line of products. But this here I've got this time today from Eco Scraps. If you want to come in a little closer, I specifically got, this bag which says for rose and flower plant food. And as you can see with the numbers down below, it says 463. 4 being 4% nitrogen, 6% phosphorus, which is what's contributing most towards the flower and bud formation on the plants, and then 3% potassium, which helps against disease resistance and root strength. So you've got these numbers that they put into their formulation, but the reason I'm going with this Eco Scraps company is if we take a look at where their ingredients are derived from, you can see that it says over here hydrolyzed feather meal, blood meal, bone meal, sulfate of potash, and compost, being all organic materials that are going into the product compared to Miracle-Gro. And let me show you what these ingredients look like. And hopefully we can see where it says derived from, and I found it over here. It says derived from over here from ammonium sulfate, potassium phosphate, potassium chlorate, urea phosphate, boric acid. Without continuing any further, the point is this was derived in a chemical factory versus this here came from an organic source and will ultimately, once added to your soil, feed the soil biology, which is going to result in a much healthier, much more stable plant than adding chemicals that don't feed your soil biology. A product like this will feed the earthworms, the nematodes, the beneficial bacteria, and so on and so forth. So that's the reason we're going with an organic product. In addition to, it has less of an impact on the environment using an organic source than using chemical sources. So now we're just going to go around each of the plants with the product. Let me just open it here. And I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit, probably about a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup. Follow your directions around each of the plants. So we're just going to go like so. And let me get these last ones over here. And I like to also then add a few scoops of compost on top of that as well, being, again, more minerals and nutrients in addition to improving the soil quality, the soil texture as well. So I'm going to add a couple scoops of compost. You can get that from your compost bin, or you can use a product like this. And this here I got from a local box store. You can see it says Kellogg's is the maker of it, and it's a grow mulch. If you take a look over here, if you make your own compost, as I do as well in my garden, you can see that it's made out of, again, organic material coming from plants and wood chips, and it's probably got some manure in here as well. But I like just putting a couple of scoops of this around each of the plants, like so. Let's add a couple more. And we'll just continue that around each of the plants. And then I like just going with my hand tool over here and just mixing the fertilizer with the added compost around each of the roses. And the goal by mixing it in, and I'm just mixing it into the top maybe 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch of soil. The goal is I'm trying to get the soil biology in contact with all of these added nutrients that we've just added to the topsoil. And that concludes this step. So we just fertilized all the roses behind me. We just added a few handfuls of compost as well to the soil, and then mixed that into the topsoil. When it comes to feeding your plants, make sure you feed them at least 3 times a year, which is spring, summer, and fall. And if you can take a look at this grid, it peaks in the summer. In the summer, you're going to want to feed your plants more, and just a little bit in the spring, a little bit in the fall, but most in the summer, and then very little to nothing. And it's typically nothing in the winter. So those are the 3 main times for feeding the plants: spring, summer, and fall. The next step here is now to add a layer of wood chips. And what the wood chips are going to do for your plants is to retain the moisture, also create a much warmer environment to support more, again, soil biology underneath the wood chips. And so again, moisture, it also is going to break down and feed those soil organisms as well. When we're not fertilizing, the wood chips will be breaking down and creating the elements that the roses need for growing successfully. So here we go with that. Aside from all the benefits that we just mentioned, it also looks beautiful around the roses. And then we'll spread that thin. And the goal is to add about a 1/2 inch to about 1 inch. I would say less than 2 inches. And the goal is, again, when it comes to the wood chips, if you can come a little bit closer here. If you can be careful when adding the wood chips, is to keep a space between the wood chips and the actual bark of the plant. As you can see that the wood chips are not living tissue. It'll be broken down by the termites and beetles and other wood destroying organisms that'll break it down into soil. In the meantime, the bark of the plant is also not living, so you don't want those insects and bacteria and whatever else coming from the wood and possibly causing what's known as stem rot and possibly rotting the stems of the roses. So keep a gap between your wood chips as well as those roses. We're going to continue this pattern all throughout our rose bed. The next step is one of the easiest, is watering. Check out what we just did with the wood chips and look at how beautiful it is. But when it comes to watering, and before, actually take a look at what we've done here. So you can see we've laid a bed of wood chips around each of the roses. Look how beautiful this is now starting to look. And you can see I've left a little bit of growth here on this plant. It just happened to be there, but it's not necessary. And now we're done. When it comes to the sprinklers, I've actually got 2 sprinkler heads in this zone. When it comes to irrigation, there's 2 ways that most people like to irrigate. One being with sprinklers and the second with the drip irrigation. The evolution towards using the drip irrigation has been to focus the water and to also control the amount of water that's applied in a given zone. But one of the drawbacks to drip irrigation is that it only waters typically, and depending on your soil type, and especially if you've got gophers and moles and other critters, is they can take the water from that drip irrigation zone and divert it through their tunnels to other parts of your garden. So be very careful and watch how your zone is being watered. What I've used in this place is actually just using the sprinkler, and I don't feel like I'm wasting any water because the water is hitting this particular wall and coming right back into the roses, and I'm controlling the number of minutes. And when it comes to spring, I'll probably water it about once a week. In the summer, I might water it twice a week, and then in the fall, cut back to once a week, and in the winter, nothing. So I'm controlling the water. I don't leave it just on timers, and if it rains, that'll be a week that I cut off the water. So when it comes to water conservation, do spend time in your garden, and your plants will reward you with whether it's flowers or vegetables or fruit. So let's, next step, water it, and that's what's going to trigger the organic material to start breaking down. It's going to start feeding the soil biology, and the whole sort of, the whole chain of life and the whole biology of what's happening underneath the soil is going to be triggered with the beginning of watering these plants. So let's get that going. Once you've watered your plants and you've allowed enough time for the water to dry, it's time to now coat all of those pruned surfaces with your IVOrganics. And the concept of using typically paint, chemical paint, to do the process, the reason behind it is that beetles will get into the canes. If you come in a little closer, you'll see here, if I point over here, you'll see the center of the wood is typically softer than the rest of the harder wood around it. But beetles will sometimes penetrate this wood and then work their way into what I like to call the heart of the plant and basically hollow out the inside of the rose. And the way this product works, if you turn it around over here, you'll take a look over here that some of the active ingredients include castor oil and cinnamon oil and clove oil and cedarwood oil and garlic oil and peppermint oil and rosemary oil. And these are all proven to work garden oils for repelling insects off your plants. And so what we're going to do here is, I'm using now colored brown. I'm just going to coat all of these pruned surfaces like so. And it works just as well with brown or green. And these are pruned from years in the past. I'm just going to coat all of the exposed surfaces like so. And I'm going to repeat the process with all of the other roses as well. So I'm just going to keep on doing that right now as well. You could also take this ready to use IVOrganic spray and just spray your plants like so. And this here creates a coat over all the stems and all the branches and also the leaves. And if you come in a little closer, you can see that we've created what appears to be, and actually functions like, an organic sunblock for the roses. And especially when you know you're going to have record-breaking heat days, you can actually reapply the product and use it up to 3 times a year to keep your plants cool as well, when you know that there's going to be a heat wave that could be potentially damaging to your roses. So if you've enjoyed this educational opportunity from IVOrganics, be sure to like it, and most importantly, by subscribing below, you'll be connected to all the other educational videos. Thanks again for watching, and happy gardening.